Play TV is here with Ryan Daut to talk about some no-limit hold'em situations and what he would do if he was faced with them. Ryan, let's say you're in the third hand of a large buy-in tournament and you're on the button with pocket queens. The blinds are $25.50 and you started with $10,000 in chips. Now the player under the gun raises to $500, the next player goes all in, and after a few moments a third player calls the all in. The action reaches you and you look at the under the gun player and see that he is acting like he's going to make the all in call. Do you make the call with queens, or do you lay them down since it's so early in the tournament and it's likely you may not have the best hands?
I would fold because you're getting 2-1 on your money right now, and if the third player calls, you're getting 3-1. And if he calls, you're almost certainly up against aces or kings, and you're not 25% equity if one of the players has aces or kings. And there's almost no way that the second player would shove and the third player would call and the undergun player would call without them having aces or kings. So I'd say at least 95% of the time in that situation you're up either aces or kings or both, and you're definitely not getting odds. You're probably about 15% against that, so I would fold.
Would you also fold that if it was the same situation but a little bit later on in the tournament?
If
maybe towards the bubble?
Well, if the blinds were a bit higher and their ranges were wider, like for example, if everybody was 20 big blinds deep instead of 200, I would say the second player has a fairly wide range, and then the third player probably has a range that I'm flipping with, so I'm still okay. And you know, with antes, I'm getting a lot more on my money, and the under the gun player plus the bigger blinds, I'm just getting more on my money, so I'm not really getting 3-1. I'm getting about 3.5 to 4-1, and it becomes a lot closer, and it's possible I am ahead. So I would call if it was about 20 big blinds, but 200 big blinds is way too much.
That makes sense. Okay, the next situation. You're in a tournament that began with 300 people and there's 70 players left. 60 players are going to get paid. You look down at pocket eights under the gun. Do you call, raise, or fold?
I would almost certainly raise, regardless of the stack sizes. If I had less than, say, 11 big blinds, I would probably go all in. If I had 12 or 13 or 14 big blinds, that's kind of a sketchy situation, and I think it might be correct to fold there because you're behind the average. It's about 50%. Somebody at the table has jacks or ace king, and it even widens to 9s and 10s. So I think I would fold with maybe 12 to 15 or 16 big blinds. And if I had over 16 big blinds, I'd probably just raise 2 or 3 times the big blind. And if I was the big stack, I'm definitely raising. I'm probably raising every hand towards the bubble. So it depends on the stack sizes what I would do. But I would probably raise, and there's only a few certain stack sizes that I would fold.
What about if it was pocket fours in that situation and you had 15 or 16 times big blind?
I would definitely fold pocket fours under the gun with that stack size. I would probably fold pocket fours up to about 30 big blinds. I underplay pairs more than most people.
Why do you think that is?
Because a lot of the games I played, it was not profitable to be playing pairs in early position because you have 8 very good players behind you, and you're in a spot where you have a tight range and they have position on you the whole hand. And it's really hard to get paid off, and you get outplayed a lot, and you're up against big hands a lot, and there's short stacks. So it's really hard to play profitably with pocket fours there. So I think for me to raise pocket fours, I would need to be a big stack, probably about 40 big blinds or higher. I would start shoving probably about 9 or 10 big blinds. Maybe 10's a little high. So probably about 9 big blinds or less, I'm shoving pocket fours.
Okay. So here's the next one. You're on the button with a 7-8 suited, and you make a small raise, say it's 2.5 times the blind. The big blind pushes back with a raise that is more than twice as much as your raise. Would you muck or make the call, or would you put your opponent on a great hand? Do you think he'd be trying to steal the pot, or what would you do there?
Generally, when somebody makes a small raise pre-flop, a small re-raise pre-flop, especially out of position, they have a very small range of hands, usually like aces, kings. Maybe that's even their entire range. So for you to make the call profitably, you need to be fairly deep. I would say probably about 35 to 40 big blinds deep is the point at which you can start calling because you're getting like 3.5 to 1, 4 to 1 on your money, and you could just try to outflop them because you know you're going to get a stack. But if you're less than that, you have to fold. You're just not getting enough value for when you hit if his stack is too small. So I would generally fold unless if you're deep in a tournament, and if you have a big stack and he has a big stack, you have 40 big blinds effective stacks, I would call.
Okay, we're ready for the last question. It's not really a situation, more of a question. Can you tell me about a time where you made a correct call, a winning call, even though you thought you were probably beat? Can you recall a hand like that?
For sure. I mean, you're put in situations where, say, this is a hypothetical, but I'm sure it's come up before. Somebody, checks the river to you, and you have an awkward stack size where you have about 1.25 times the pot left on the river, but you have a hand that you need to value bet. Like you're beating enough of his range, and he's calling enough of the time that it's important for you to value bet. Say like aces on a semi-dry board, and he check shoves the river, and you think he might be doing it with a worse hand, but you're not really sure. But you're getting like 4-1 odds at that point. You're fairly certain you're beaten, but you have to call because you're ahead more than 20% of the time. So a situation like that, when you think you're beat, but the pot odds...
You just have to call.
Yeah, the pot odds are such that you're ahead more than you have to be to make the call profitably. So a situation like that, I've called even though I thought it was behind.